Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. That music means it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin today. We got a whole bunch of weird questions from all around the internet, all around the world for Jimmy Akin today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the weirdness. Jimmy Akin, of course, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where week after week he takes on weird questions in long episodes, not in shorter answers like he will today. So if you want hundreds of episodes of all kinds of mysteries of all different, from all around the world and from every different kind of possible mystery, of faith mysteries, of every kind of mystery in the world, aliens, ghosts, and I'm trying to give you a flavor of the thing. I think aliens and ghosts is enough. Jimmy Akin, thank you for being here for some weird questions.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Psychopaths. And speaking of ghosts, those were the subjects of the two most recent episodes of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World at the time this program releases. We just wrapped up a two-parter looking at the ghosts reported on the USS Hornet, an aircraft carrier from the World War II era that is reported to have an entire ghost community living aboard with a chain of command and everything. So some really interesting stuff. Yeah.
Nice. All right. And what's the other one? You did 2 episodes on ghosts?
Two episodes on the USS Hornet.
On the Hornet. Oh, okay. Very good. Check it out at mysterious.fm or wherever you get your podcasts. There's a reason it's one of the most popular documentary podcasts out there because each week a new and exciting mystery with Jimmy. All right. Weird questions, they get weird sometimes. So buckle up. We're going to get into the weirdness. This first one is a little bit long. So I have a weird question for Jimmy. Well, that's a promising beginning.
Who's asking this question?
Landon. I apologize, Landon.
Okay.
I apologize for that. What happened to Jimmy between episodes 314 and 315? The YouTube video on The Soul of Frankenstein's Monster is an audio-only version with no camera. Ominous, to say the least. In episode 316, we once again see Jimmy, but now he dons a white cowboy hat. There was mention of a move back to the Ozark, and this is where my questions emerge. There is a distinct change in Jimmy's pronunciation of words, especially the words ending in ing. Jimmy now pronounces words with ing with a more redacted in. Was Jimmy abducted? This is a very important question. Are the Borg involved? Has there been an assimilation? Has Jimmy employed AI in his likeness and asked the program to represent him in a more Western fashion? Does the hat have influence over Jimmy's dictation? Is there something in the water in Arkansas? This is a lot. Does Jimmy have an identical twin who has taken over? I mean, no offense by my question, Jimmy. The change in dictation was very noticeable and weighs on my mind when I listen to episodes now. Settle the matter and remove the perplexation. Wow, what a word. God bless and thank you for the entertainment and enlightenment. All right, Landon, thanks.
Okay, so Landon's encountering a couple of things. Now, the first one is the cowboy hat. And I've worn cowboy hats for years. People who know me and would see me, out and about or driving around or things like that have seen me wearing a cowboy hat for, literally decades. And a number of years ago, I started wearing it when I would also give talks. And so like when I appear at the Catholic Answers conference in September, I wear my hat when I give my talk. But I eventually decided, I'm just going to make this part of my standard branding. And so I decided to start wearing a hat when I'm doing live streams and recordings as well. So it's just part of my branding now. When it comes to to my accent, that's something that is because of the move back to the Ozarks. I grew up here in Northwest Arkansas in the Ozarks. It's where I'm from. And so when I moved back to the Ozarks about a year and a half ago, coming up on 2 years at this point, I decided, I've been in California for 30 years. I've been suppressing Southern elements in my speech, and I'm going to go back to using the kind of accent I grew up around. And so, anytime you have an accent shift, it's a little uneven. And some people, because it takes a little while for the accent to reassert itself or settle in or whatever. And so people noticed quickly that I was so-called dropping my G's, which really amounts to nasalizing the ing suffix, so it becomes in. But there are other elements to the accent too. You'll notice my use of vowels is different. And, I decided to just flip the switch rather than drag out the process and have it be a long drawn out thing. I figured everyone would get used to it quicker if I just did it all at once. And, it takes a little while to settle in, but that's what's going on. No Borg, no AI, no identical twin, no nothing like that.
As a matter of fact, the Borg is quite a distinct accent. You could pick that one up, I think, Landon. I remember 7 of 9. She still couldn't she couldn't lose the Borg accent even after years. She still had that Borg accent. All right, we got time for this. This one comes from Chaz. If the Son incarnated on multiple alien worlds and ascended to the right hand of the Father from each, would he have more than one body in heaven? If so, would he have multiple thrones?
Okay, so let's notice that Chaz is asking me this question. And so I'm going to answer this question. But a lot of people, when I answer questions, they don't notice that I was asked this. Instead, they say things like, Jimmy Akin is advocating the idea there are multiple Christs on multiple worlds. Okay, Jimmy Akin is not doing any such thing. Jimmy Akin has been asked a question: if there were multiple Christs on multiple worlds, what would the results be? So that's not the same thing as advocating the idea this is real. I don't know that there are intelligent aliens, much less do I know that they're fallen, much less do I know that Jesus is incarnated on these worlds. God might have chosen not to redeem these aliens, or he might have chosen to redeem them in some other way that didn't involve an incarnation of his Son. So I'm being asked this question, so I'll answer it. If the Son incarnated on multiple alien worlds and then from these alien worlds ascended to the right hand of the Father from each, would he have more than one body in heaven? Well, presumably, if he incarnated on these worlds, he would have taken on a body. And if he then ascended to the right hand of the Father in heaven, he presumably would have taken that body with him. And so he would presumably have more than one body in heaven. There's nothing that contradicts God's omnipotence in doing that. Thomas Aquinas points out, for example, that it's possible for all three of the persons of the Holy Trinity to incarnate if they chose. And if you can do it once, you can do it more than once. Omnipotence is not, the ability to do anything is not limited. And so if you can incarnate once, you can incarnate multiple times under God's omnipotence. So there's no intrinsic problem there from a divine power perspective. If so, the question continues, would he, the Son, have multiple thrones? Well, possibly. However, I would be a little cautious here because, the image of God the Son seated at the right hand of the Father is an image that's based on human customs, where you have like a king seated on his throne, and whoever his right hand man is seated on another throne at his right hand. But this is based on human customs. And if he had incarnated on other worlds, they might not have thrones at all. They might not even have the ability to sit down. That's something, or they might not sit down the way humans do on chairs. So even with regard to our Jesus and his sitting on a throne, I don't know that it's a literal throne. I think that this image is meant to convey the idea that Jesus is right up there with God as a power in heaven, with God the Father as a power in heaven. And whether there's a literal chair, I don't know, because God doesn't literally have a body, and apart from the incarnation. So God the Father doesn't have a literal body and wouldn't sit in a literal throne. And that raises a question about how literally should we take this image.
All right, Chaz, thank you very much for the question. It's weird questions. The weirdness has just started. Lots more to come right after this on Catholic Answers with Jimmy Akin.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
Proclaiming the faith, changing lives.
The year was 1981. The FCC license to operate a satellite Earth station, the first ever given to an order of nuns, was granted to Our Lady of the Angels Monastery. Mother Angelica flips the switch and EWTN begins transmitting from Irondale, Alabama.
To learn more about Mother Angelica's life and the history of EWTN, visit EWTN.com/Mother Angelica.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Hey, all this year, everybody who joins Society 315 gets a full year of the Hallow app when they join. If you'd like to find out more about the Catholic Answers Society 315, just go to casociety315.com, casociety315.com. Next question. Oh, it's weird questions with Jimmy Akin. And this next weird question comes from Francis. Hello, Mr. Akin and Cy Kellett. My question is, how would you go about baptizing the White Witch from the book The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis set in Narnia? Big fan of the work you do. Also, how would you go about baptizing the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz, given her allergic reaction to water? All right, about big fan of you guys. Keep up the great work. Oh, well, thank you very much, Francis.
Okay, so Jadis, or the White Witch in the Chronicles of Narnia, is not allergic to water. And while she does have the ability to freeze water, like when she froze Narnia so that it was always winter and never Christmas, if she had repented and wanted to be baptized, well, you just say, hey, lay off on the freezing business for a couple of minutes. We got something to do. And then you'd baptize her the normal way. So it wouldn't be a problem. It would be a problem with the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz, because she is allergic to water. You know, at the towards the end of the movie, Dorothy throws a bucket of water at her and she just melts and all of her beautiful wickedness is destroyed. So, well, I guess if she wanted to be baptized, she would have turned her back on her beautiful wickedness. But we would have an obstacle in terms of how to baptize her. Now, it could turn out, depending on what Frank L. Baum wanted to do, that her allergy to water was a product of her beautiful wickedness, in which case, when she turned her back on it and repented of her beautiful wickedness, she might have lost her allergy to water. So you could baptize her in the normal way too. But let's suppose that didn't happen. What would you do then? Well, of course, she is able to have baptism of desire. You know, she's able to be saved in that way. But it's better to baptize her if it's possible, so that she doesn't have just baptism of desire, because you need actual baptism in order to access the other sacraments. And so you would want to baptize her if at all possible. How could you do that? Well, if I were in charge of this case, which I'm not, I would do some testing. I would see, you know, what kind of moisture tolerance does she have? Because there is moisture in the air, and she's not melting down to nothing because of that moisture. So she's obviously got some tolerance to moisture. So I would like do some tests. I would get a cloth. I would put a little bit of moisture on it and then touch it to her skin and see what the reaction is and so forth. The ideal would be to use a very limited amount of water, just enough so that it could flow on her skin, and baptize her with, you know, maybe an eyedropper. or something, using just enough water so that it could flow on her skin, and baptize her in that way, assuming that prior testing showed she could tolerate that amount of water. Now, it might not be fun for her. It might hurt. It might even damage her skin. But that would be a way in relative safety that you could still try to baptize the Wicked Witch.
Francis, thank you for those important questions. You ever play that? If I were Pope, if I were Pope, Jimmy Akin would be the head of the dicastery for the salvation of fictional witches. I would.
You have to create a new dicastery. I'd take Doctrine of the Faith, but whatever. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Hey, take what you can get if you get to live in Rome. Jake next with another weird question for Jimmy. I understand the church teaches that the death penalty is inadmissible. My understanding is that this is because modern society has the means and resources to process dangerous criminals without the death penalty. Correct me if I'm wrong. My question, let's say that a group of humans were surviving on an island cut off from the world and they established a primitive society with their laws to help them survive. In this situation, they wouldn't have the means and resources that modern society has to deal with dangerous criminals. Could they morally administer the death penalty in certain circumstances, or would they have to follow the current teaching of the magisterium? What ethical considerations would they have to take into account if they were to administer the death penalty?
Okay, so regarding the teaching on inadmissibility, this is something that was introduced in the reign of Pope Francis, and I think that the word inadmissible was chosen. Now, people have commented on it and said it's not part of our tradition to use this word. We don't exactly know what it means. And I think, yes, that's the point. I think Pope Francis had a powerful intuition that the death penalty should not be used, and the word inadmissible was chosen precisely because it's ambiguous. So you can read it as, well, we shouldn't, it clearly means we shouldn't do it. But you can read it in a way that's consistent with previous church teaching that indicated the death penalty was permissible in some situations, but you could also read it as, no, it's never really been permissible at all. That was a misunderstanding in the past. And so I think that it's chosen deliberately to communicate the message, don't do this, but leave it open as to the status of past magisterial teaching. Personally, I'm on the side of we should read it as consistent with past teaching that there have been situations where the death penalty is morally permissible, and I think that's the case even today, because because there is a right of self-defense. If someone breaks into your house, you can use lethal and is trying to kill you and your family, you can use lethal force to defend yourself. Well, that's the death penalty. If you're using lethal force on someone, you can similarly use lethal force in wartime. Now, we don't want wars. We want to do everything we can to avoid wars and to end wars. But if a war starts, you can use lethal force to defend yourself. So I think we need to read the death penalty's inadmissible status in a way that's consistent with those facts, which would mean, in principle, there are situations where the use of lethal force is warranted. So what about this island society where you've got a group of people on an island? They have no contact. They have no, I'm going to assume the island is small enough that they can't just separate and say, okay, we've got this person here who's done something worthy of death. Let's say he's killed another fellow castaway. And, let's suppose one of the castaways goes berserk and kills Mr. Howell, for example.
That would be the one. That would be the one to take out if you're going to go berserk. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe over inheritance rights or something.
Right, yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to assume the island is small enough you can't just exile this guy, because that's the obvious solution. If you got a big enough island, you say, okay, we're voting you out of the group. We can't vote you off the island, but we're voting you out of the group. And so you're going to have to live by yourself. And that would be a realistic possibility that would need to be considered if the island is big enough. But just to, create a moral crucible to force out the truth, let's suppose the island is not big enough to exile someone. Let's suppose it's a really teeny tiny island. Well, in that case, if there are no other better ways of dealing with the situation, then I would say the use of lethal force to protect future islanders. I'm going to assume this person's not going to stop at Mr. Howell. He's got his sights next on Mrs. Howell, so he can, once he's eliminated the Howells, he can inherit all their money. Well, okay, if he's not going to stop, and this is the use of lethal force is the only practical way to protect society, then I would say the use of lethal force would be warranted the same way if someone breaks into your house which is basically a little island. If someone breaks into your house and is trying to kill you and your family, then you would be warranted in using lethal force to end that threat. And I'd say the same thing would be true on an island rather than a house, although they did have those grass huts, on Gilligan's Island.
Yeah. You got to protect Lovey, though. I mean, that's what I'm taking from this. All right, Jake. Thank you very much for the question. This one comes from Brooke Kennel 2636. Do criminals with psychopathic disorders have free will? If their free will is compromised by their psychopathy, does that mean that they are not fully accountable, even if their crimes are heinous? Also, what's up with the... Oh, this is a completely different question. Also, what's up with the Holy House of Loreto? Is it legit?
Okay, so let's deal with the second question first. The Holy House of Loreto is a structure that is currently housed in Loreto, Italy, and it's reputed to have been like the home of the Holy Family and was transported by angels from the Holy Land to Loreto. It appears, at least from the reading I've done, and I have not yet done a deep dive into this, but I may well do a Mysterious World episode on it in the future. It appears, based on the reading that I've done, that there is a basis to this legend, that it is a structure that originally is not from Loreto, and that it was transported to Loreto by the Angeli family. Angeli being an Italian name that means angels. And so this became the basis of the legend that the house was transported by angels. So I don't think that it was transported by angels in the sense of heavenly beings that don't natively have bodies. I think it was transported, at least based on the reading that I've done, by earthly beings that natively do have bodies and happen to be named Angeli. So that's what's up with the Holy House of Loreto as far as I'm aware. When it comes to criminals with psychopathic disorders, I would say it's going to depend on a few factors. There's a whole scale of psychopathy. It goes from very mild to very extreme. It's measured these days commonly by what's known as the PCLR checklist, which is a measurement of how many psychopathic tendencies does the individual have. And I would say the degree to which free will is compromised is going to depend on the degree of psychopathy. There are going to be people with low psychopathic tendencies who clearly have free will and are clearly responsible. But then people who are maxing out the scale, they may have severely compromised free will. And to the extent their free will is compromised, the same principles are going to apply to them as apply to anybody. To the extent their free will is compromised and they're not acting as rational moral agents, they're not going to be held responsible to that extent. So it can diminish or potentially even remove moral responsibility for heinous actions, the same way any kind of psychological or mental impediment can remove or can diminish or even remove responsibility for what a person does. If you're not a rational moral agent, then you're not going to be held as accountable the way a rational moral agent will. All
right. Every time someone mentions that test, what'd you call it, PCLR test?
The PCLR checklist.
Yeah, I have to go back and take the test again to find out. find out. I got how many of these to apply. Like,
I'm pretty sure that Psychopaths would score very low on the PCLR.
But because you can score it yourself, right? You don't need, like, it's not like someone else administers. You like just look at the things and go.
They want you to be specially trained in how to apply it. I mean, you can find the questions and estimate yourself, but in order to have a medical diagnosis, they want, or a psychological diagnosis, they want a trained administrator to administer it to you.
Oh, I see. All right. Well, the last one I note is criminal versatility. And I do feel like I lack virtually every kind of versatility. So I don't think I have criminal versatility. So I'm pretty.
I think I'd score pretty high on that.
Like
I
criminal
never use
versatility?
my powers for bad, but if I wanted to, I think I could be pretty versatile.
I thought of a crime one time. I'll tell you about it when we come back, because someone told me there's a reason why no one commits this crime that I invented. All right, well, let's take a quick break. More weird questions with Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Have you ever wondered about the mysterious, even obscure aspects of the Catholic faith? Dive into the Jimmy Akin podcast, where Jimmy brings together information from many fields as he pushes the boundaries of apologetics. Tune in today to the Jimmy Akin podcast, Mysteries of the Faith, a highly entertaining, informative, and at times humorous show that will help you grow in your faith. Visit JimmyAkinPodcast.com today to subscribe.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
What was the church like in its infancy? In a word, Catholic. And Joe Heschmeyer has the receipts. In his best-selling book, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, he gives you the details from the historical records of the first 2 centuries of Christianity. Right now, get a copy for just $10, plus free shipping if you live in the continental United States. Get more information and order The Early Church Was the Catholic Church at theearlychurchwascatholic.com.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. And it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour and next hour. Both hours, weird questions. And we got lots of weird questions. I did say that I had invented a crime, so I want to tell Jimmy about my crime and why I was advised that why no one ever committed this crime. This is years ago. This is before modern computer tracking chips could be put in things and all that. And I thought, if you're a counterfeiter, don't counterfeit currency. Counterfeit chips for a Las Vegas casino. So I wasn't going to do it. I was just thinking this through. And so I told this to a gambler, and he goes, there's a reason why people don't do that. Because if the federal government catches you, they put you in jail. But if the casinos catch you, they take you out to the desert and dig a hole. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, well, I can see why no one commits that. Well, maybe somebody did commit that. I don't know. But I thought I was so clever with my crime, but I'm not brave enough to
There would also be a whole bunch of security measures in addition, even back in the day before tracking chips. I don't know that they put RFID chips in casino chips now or not, but even back in the day, there would have been security measures to keep people from smuggling in chips and doing exactly that.
Yeah. Well.
And digging a hole in the desert would be one of the fail safes.
Right. I've heard there's a lot of holes out there in the desert outside Las Vegas. So that's my criminal versatility. That's what I came up for the crime of the century. But Now, kids, don't do this. All right, don't counterfeit things. I just
No, don't do this
Don't
or
do
any
crimes.
other crimes that Cy Kellett recommends.
Right, exactly. All right, let's get a question from Daniel for Jimmy. If Adam did not eat the fruit, what would it mean for the fall and the original sin if only one parent ate the fruit?
Yeah, this question comes up periodically, and the answer is we don't know because we're not in that situation. And so if only, I mean, we're taking Adam and Eve as literal people who literally ate a fruit. And, there's reason to, question that because the church has acknowledged that early Genesis contains symbolic and figurative imagery, including the fruit. It wasn't really a fruit. That's a symbol that's used to communicate the choice that our first parents had to make. And since our first parents made the bad choice, we don't know what would have happened if only one of them had done that, or if only some of them had done that. It's possible that if only some had made the bad choice, then only they would have fallen, and the rest of the human race would be left unfallen. It's also possible that if the right people fell, it would have ruined it for everybody. And so this is a model that in Protestant circles is sometimes called federal headship. The idea is that Adam represented the entire federation of mankind. He was the head of mankind. And so when he fell, it basically ruined everything for everybody. And so even if you didn't personally sin, you would be negatively impacted by Adam's sin. And so we don't know what would have happened. We can speculate about it, but the two leading possibilities would seem to be that only some people would be fallen and others wouldn't. It's also possible in that original community, and it's also possible that the whole community would have fallen through some kind of federal headship arrangement. A related question would then be what happens next after that first generation? Because if you have the reason that we inherit so-called original sin today, which is a deprivation of sanctifying grace, is because our parents are not able to pass on to us the original righteousness that God originally gave the human race. So what happens if you have, let's suppose Eve falls and Adam doesn't. Okay. So they then, as they say in the Incredibles, they then get busy, and what happens with their children? If Adam is unfallen, is he able to pass on that original righteousness? In which case, only Eve is fallen, and all of their kids turn out fine. Or does Eve's fallenness block Adam's ability to transmit original righteousness, so that even though Adam is unfallen, all of their kids end up fallen as well? And the answer is we don't know. So this is something we can speculate about, but we don't have the answers on this. It's a different set of timelines than we're in.
Daniel, thank you very much for that question. This one comes from Dr. Tafazi. Genetic enhancements on human embryos are clearly immoral because it kills them. But would it be permissible to modify your own germinal tissue, which produces gametes, to not transmit flawed genes to your offspring?
So the first thing I'd have to say is I'm not sure about the initial statement that genetic enhancements on human embryos are clearly immoral because it kills them. It may do that now, but it may not always do that. There may be scenarios in the future where gene therapy has been made safe enough that you could repair genetic damage to people at the embryo stage or later in life. And so if someone was born with a horrible genetic defect, you could apply gene therapy directly to that person, either while they're still an embryo in a safe way, or when they're at a later stage of development, like a child or an adult or something like that. But if something does kill an embryo, well, then obviously that is immoral. You cannot take the life of an innocent person, even if they're an embryo. A person is a person, no matter how small. So what about the main question, though, that Dr. Tafazi asks, which is using modifying your own germinal tissue that produces gametes so that your children will not inherit a particular flaw? Well, that's a form of gene therapy that would be totally fine. So, you know, if you have a significant genetic defect that you could pass on to your children, and there's a gene therapy that would stop you from passing that on to your children and allow your children to have normal, healthy genetic codes, then you could absolutely do that. Where the issue of gene therapy gets more dicey is when you're not just repairing damage, but when you're trying to make improvements on the human race, like, oh, I want all my kids to be really tall, or oh, I want all my kids to be really smart, or oh, I want all my kids to be really beautiful. Those kind of enhancements are much more problematic. But if you're just repairing damage, so let's say you've got genes that predispose. So, for example, one of the common genetic defects in certain populations, and this includes in sub-Saharan Africa, it also includes parts of Italy, is there is a recessive gene that that can lead to sickle cell anemia. And if you get 2 copies of this gene, then you get sickle cell anemia, and that's bad. The advantage of the reason that this has evolved, though, is because the same genetic modification that can cause sickle cell anemia also protects you against malaria. And so this genetic mutation tends to be common in areas where there's a lot of malaria, like sub-Saharan Africa and the swampy parts of Italy. You know, Rome used to have terrible malaria problems. And so this evolved as a way of protecting the populations against malaria, but it comes with a cost, which is it also produces sickle cell anemia. Well, today we have ways of dealing with malaria, like let's drain the swamps, or let's use various medications. And so malaria isn't the threat that it was even 100 years ago. Used to be just terrible. You know, if you like read Laura Ingalls Wilder books, you know, there's a part where the whole family gets malaria and it's just awful. Well, okay, so today the sickle, at least in many parts of the world, the sickle cell anemia gene is not performing its benefit because we've got other ways of dealing with malaria. And so you could have, if you don't want to have your children have the possibility of getting sickle cell anemia, you could have gene therapy to eliminate that mutation in your gene, in your genetic code, and then you wouldn't pass it on to your offspring, and they just have to deal with malaria some other way, which today we have the ability to do.
All right, Dr. Tafazi, I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you very much for the question. This next one comes from Shaggy Cordy. 8228, and it's about ghosts and zombies, and I know a famous Shaggy who frequently deals with ghosts and zombies, so I don't know if it's that one. Do ghosts watch...
I'm sure that Shaggy could answer this question.
Yeah, probably. That's probably right. Do ghosts watch zombies walk around and scream at their bodies for doing dumb things, like fall in a manhole or walk into a glass door?
Okay, so in our timeline, ghosts are real, and zombies are also real, but they are not soulless humans. There really are people who are zombies in Haiti, and I did a 2-parter on Mysterious World about this. They are individuals who have been involuntarily subjected to chemical manipulation that specifically it appears with, among other chemicals, tetrodotoxin, which is the poison that is produced by pufferfish, which grow in the waters off of Haiti. And so Haitian witch doctors will take tetrodotoxin and other substances and make a a poison that will cause a person to appear to die. And then when they revive, they may have suffered brain damage from the poison, or they may be kept in a state where they are controllable by continuing to feed them additional toxic substances. And there are people to whom this has happened who have died twice. We have medical records of, okay, this guy back in the 1960s, he came into the hospital, he died medically, and then now here he is again 20 years later, having just escaped from a zombie plantation. This kind of thing really happens. Wow. And it is documented. But in this case, the person didn't really die. They just appeared to die. So they still have their own soul. There's no separated soul. So what we have, there are separated souls or ghosts, but they're not leaving their bodies behind walking around like zombies. So that's not our reality. But what if we're in a different reality? Like on the American TV show Ghosts. They actually had this situation crop up recently where, so Ghosts is about a young man and a young woman who run a hotel. The woman gets, or bed and breakfast or whatever, the woman gets knocked on the head, and after she revives, she can see ghosts, including the ghosts that live on their property. Well, one of the ghosts is a guy named Pete. He was a scoutmaster who died when he got shot through the neck with an arrow. And Pete is such a super nice guy. He's just really kind and really positive, and he's just super nice to everybody. Meanwhile, the woman's husband, he's also a nice guy, but he's not quite as nice as Pete. And so on a recent episode of Ghosts, Pete accidentally got into Jay, that's the husband's body. And this was totally by accident. And he ends up in charge of Jay's body. So they do an exorcism to get Pete out of Jay's body. But the problem is the exorcism drives out the evil spirit. And since Jay is not quite as nice as Pete, Jay gets driven out of his own body.
Yeah.
So,
he's the evil one of the two.
He's of the two. And so then later, Jay, they do get Pete out of Jay's body. And then you have this zombie Jay walking around with temporary ghost Jay frustrated at it. And if that was something that happened in real life, ghosts have opinions about things too. And if they see their body walking around doing dumb stuff like falling into manholes or crashing through glass doors, I know I would feel outraged and frustrated if I saw my body doing that. And so if it was possible in our world to have a person's soulless body still walking around and me as a ghost still witness it, I'd be frustrated watching it doing dumb stuff. So I think that that would be something that would happen if this was possible, which it does not appear to be in our universe.
Thank you, Scooby. Oh, excuse me. Thank you, Shaggy, for the question. We will take a very quick break. We'll be right back with more Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
In Morse code, the sequence SOS is a distress call. It's been said that it stands for Save Our Souls. Well, right now our world is in big trouble, and we're putting out an SOS call for help. Will you answer that call? St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, has hundreds of teams who share the good news with souls who don't know Jesus. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to get involved.
He is only one of 4 popes honored as the Great.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Leo I was pope at a time when Roman civilization was being overrun by barbarian armies. He stood as a light in the darkness and even saved the city of Rome from destruction by Attila and the Huns. Leo died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. When you hear that music, you know we're having fun. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live this hour and next hour. And lots of weird questions are in. This one comes from Maxwell. If a priest goes to a bakery and consecrates all the bread, would those bread now become the body and blood of Jesus?
Yeah. So the answer to this one seems to be a straightforward yes. I mean, assuming the bread is otherwise valid matter, which if it is recognized as bread, it presumably would be. Now, if it's made out of some really weird stuff, so it wouldn't qualify as wheat bread, maybe not. Or if it's been doctored up with bunches of other substances, you know, so it's like banana bread or something, well, maybe not. But if it's recognized by ordinary people as wheat bread, even if it's got an admixture of other substances in it, then it's going to be valid matter. And so a priest has the ability to consecrate the bread that's in his physical presence, assuming that he has the intention to consecrate it. And this is why priests are taught in seminary that they should form a habitual intention to consecrate all of the bread on the altar in front of them. And so they don't have to every time think about each and every host. It's just my intention is to consecrate all of this bread right here on the altar in front of me. But they're not intended to like consecrate the unconsecrated hosts in stacks back in the sacristy. You know, they're concentrating on the altar. Well, okay, they can do this for bread that's in their presence. So if they change their intention and walk into a bakery and decide, I have the intention to consecrate all of the bread in this bakery, and it's in their physical presence, then yeah, that would be what would happen. It would be gravely immoral and gravely illicit for a priest to do this, but it would be metaphysically possible for him to do it.
Maxwell, it's Maxell. I apologize. I put a W in there where there wasn't one. Thank you very much for the question. Christine wants to know this: will our resurrected bodies wear clothes?
Well, Jesus apparently did. The New Testament reports him showing up to the disciples, and they don't remark on him being naked. So I would assume he was wearing clothes at the time. And, you know, it's not like our bodies are going to suddenly develop an allergy to wearing clothes. So I think it's certainly possible for us to wear clothes in the resurrection. Will we always? Well, maybe not. You know, we use clothes for protection from weather and so forth. And if we're in our resurrected forms, we may not, you know, with the upgrade, the preternatural gifts we'll have, we may not need clothes for protection. And we also wear clothes for modesty and, you know, to help prevent temptation and things like that. But we may not need modesty or be subject to temptation in the resurrection, and so we may not need him for that reason. Also, just for what it's worth, even though early Genesis involves symbolism, Adam and Eve are depicted as not originally needing or wearing clothes. There's something that came after the fall. So if we go back to a pre-fall or better than pre-fall state, we may not need clothes either. And so I would say that will we wear clothes in the resurrection? Well, if we want to, we will. And on various occasions, we may, just like Jesus. But just like in this life, we may not always need them or wear them. Christine, thank you for that question. Could we? You know, there's a more. Well, you ask your question, then I'll bring up a follow-up.
I mean, if we do wear clothes, could we wear like a disco suit that John Travolta wore in Saturday Night Fever?
If that's what you need in the resurrection to be happy, you can wear your John Travolta disco suit.
Okay, thank you.
Now, what's a related interesting question that Christine doesn't ask about is, what about ghosts who don't have bodies?
Oh yeah,
because they frequently appear to people wearing clothes. And actually, if you go on the peer-reviewed Encyclopedia website produced by the Society for Psychical Research in England, they actually have like a 2,000-word article about ghosts and clothing. because they do appear wearing clothes to people, and that's often how they're recognized. They often wear the kind of clothes they wore when they were younger, for example. And the standard interpretation is this is part of a projection. It's a telepathic projection. Ghosts appear to people how they want to appear. So when you have an after-death communication of one of your departed loved ones, they frequently don't look like they did on their deathbed. Instead, they look younger. They're not wearing a hospital gown. They're wearing clothing that they liked, and there are even reports of ghosts who change their appearance to keep up with the fashions. I know about one ghost at a location in California known as the Moss Beach Distillery, who was apparently murdered in like the 1940s or something, or maybe 30s. I think it was during Prohibition. And she was known as the Lady in Blue because she always was wearing this blue dress from the 1940s. But eventually she started talking to people who witnessed her about modern fashions, and she changed her blue dress into something more modern.
There's hope. There's hope. I might be fashionable in the next world, Christine. Thank you very much for the question. This one comes from Jordan. If two people were to swap bodies, a Freaky Friday kind of situation, and if one person were to get in a fatal accident while the bodies were swapped, would both people be considered dead?
Okay, so someone's considered dead if their soul is separated from their body. And so actually, if you think about the Freaky Friday situation, if you have two people, let's call them Jim and Bill, and Jim's soul goes into Bill's body and Bill's soul goes into Jim's body, you could technically consider them both dead right there because their souls are separated from their bodies. But this isn't really what we normally mean by dead. If they're still, they're in a body, it's not theirs, but they're in a body, and it's, living and functioning and having metabolism going on, and it's digesting food, and they're moving around and in control of it. I wouldn't really say Jim and Bill are both dead, even though they're out of their bodies. Mm-hmm. So we'll amend our definition of dead to be you're not in any living body. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if that's the case, well, let's suppose Jim in Bill's body goes reckless driving and gets killed, and so Bill's body stops functioning. Well, Jim, he's no longer in Bill's body because Bill's body is dead, and so I would say at this point Jim is dead, but Bill, who is in Jim's body, is still alive because even though he's not in his own body, he is in a body. It's a living body. It's doing what it's supposed to do. Bill is in control of it. So Bill, who is in Jim's body, I would say is still alive. Now this gets more complicated when we try to put them back in their own bodies. It is possible that Jim could get back in Jim's body and force Bill out of it, at which point Bill would now be the dead one and Jim would be the living one. So I think there are a number of scenarios here, and I'm sure, complexify them further depending on how the body swapping works. But there's a sketch of the question as presented.
Jordan, thank you very much for that important question. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour and next, and they keep coming. There's no end to the weird questions for Jimmy Akin. And again, I know there's kids listening. Don't swap bodies. Don't do that. Even if you have the opportunity to swap the body with your mother so that you can drive and do whatever you want, don't do that. There are about 1 million more of these to come. If you really like Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin, you should check out Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. It's every Friday a new episode drops. There are more than 300 episodes, heading towards 400 episodes now and beyond. And on every kind of mystery and oddity and brain tantalizing, unusual event, you'll find them all there, and Jimmy approaches them using both the perspective of reason and faith to look at them. You can find it at mysterious.fm. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Or you can go to Jimmy Akin's YouTube page, where you can also find his other podcast, the Jimmy Akin Podcast, where he does Mysteries of the Faith exclusively there at the Jimmy Akin Podcast. We're going to take a very quick break. We will be right back with more weirdness with Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Yeah, that's a little bit different music. That's because it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. We get all kinds of weird questions. As a matter of fact, Jimmy has developed a reputation, such a reputation for weird questions, that often when another apologist is on and we get a weird question, their first reaction is, oh, that's a Jimmy Akin question. Because Jimmy's willing to take whatever question you've got, take it seriously, and give you the best answer that he can come up with. So people have taken him up on that and sent all kinds of weird questions. And I have lost my place. Who are we going to next? Is it Mike?
Question 29.
Yeah, okay. I'm back to where we were. All right, this one comes from Mike. I've heard some folks claim that hell is where God isn't present. But isn't that impossible if God is omnipresent?
Yeah, so this question comes up periodically, and it's based on two concepts. The first concept is that hell is the absence of God, and that's, yeah, I have trouble saying that's literally true, because of God's omnipresence. But God's omnipresence itself is a concept that has to be understood with some finesse, because it's not like God has a body that fills physical space. So even talking about God being omnipresent God isn't present in a place the way you or I are present in a place. You know, you or I are present in a place if that's where our body is located. But God doesn't have a body apart from the incarnation. And so what do we mean when we talk about God's presence somewhere? Well, according to the medieval theologians like St. Thomas Aquinas, the same thing is actually true not just of God, but of angels, because angels also don't have bodies, and neither do humans when they are in a discarnate state, after they're dead. Ghosts, at least according to Aquinas, don't have a physical location either, because they don't have a spirit body. Now, I think you might be able to question this idea in terms of human spirits. They may not, and I think you could question it in terms of angels, but just hypothetically, I'm not seriously proposing that they have spirit bodies. But I think hypothetically one could wonder about that. Is there a possibility that they might have something that has physical location, even if it's not a physical body? But the people like Aquinas assumed they didn't, and so they actually answered this question in principle. So Aquinas would say, how can an angel or human spirit be present somewhere without a physical body? And what Aquinas concluded was, well, they have an effect in different places. So like if an angel is, let's say, stirring up some water somewhere, like at a healing pool in Bethesda, in Jerusalem. This is based on some variant readings in the Gospel of John, where there's this healing pool in Jerusalem, or there's this pool in Jerusalem. And according to some manuscripts, there was an angel that would come down and stir up the waters, and then whoever got in the pool first would get healed. And there's a lame guy there. I don't mean he was lame in the modern sense. I mean he physically could not walk, and he couldn't get into the pool in time. So he was always getting left out on the healing. And so let's suppose you've got an angel stirring up the waters. Well, okay, that angel is having an effect on this location. And so Aquinas would say that angels can have an effect, or can be spoken of as being present wherever they're having an effect. So you could say the angel is here at the Pool of Bethesda because it's affected the Pool of Bethesda. Even though technically the angel does not have a spatial location at all, we can still analogically speak of it as having a location because of where it's affected. So if we take that principle and we apply it to God, what do we get? Well, God is the creator of the world, and the world would not exist if God hadn't created it, and the world would not continue to exist if God didn't continue to create it and maintain it in existence. This is something John Paul II, for example, spoke about how the preservation of the universe is a form of continuous creation on God's part. He has to keep creating the space and time to maintain the universe in existence. And so God affects all physical locations, and therefore you can speak of God analogically the way you speak of an angel being present where it's having an effect. You can speak of God as being present everywhere because he's having an effect everywhere. He's maintaining everything in existence. And so given that, even though God doesn't have a physical body and is not present the way we are present, he nevertheless can be spoken of as being omnipresent because he has an effect everywhere on everything that exists. So given that, if someone is in hell, they continue to exist, and so God is continuing to have an effect on them. And so in this sense, God is present where this person is present. And that means this idea that hell is where God is not has to be understood in some other sense. Now, there is a basis for people saying like hell is the absence of God, because there are these passages in the New Testament where Jesus, for example, depicts hell as like outer darkness, like in the parable of the wedding garments, where the king throws a banquet for his son and, a bunch of people don't come. And so he invites a lot of other people in. But when the king in the parable who represents God is going around, he finds this guy who is not properly attired for a wedding. So he's disrespecting the host by showing up and not wearing a proper wedding garment. So he's being a jerk. He's kind of snubbing his nose in the host's face. And so the king orders that this guy be taken out and thrust into outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so this parable depicts hell as a state of separation from God. And so the question, and that's a valid, way of looking at things. So the question is, given that God is analogically omnipresent everywhere because he has an effect everywhere, including for the damned person that continues to exist, what kind of separation are we talking about here? And I think the answer is spiritual separation. Hell is the spiritual absence of God, where one has, by one's will, turned away from God and rejected him on a spiritual level. You can't reject him on an ontological level because he keeps you in existence. So you always have ontology is the study of existence. And so you can't reject God on an ontological level. You always have an ontological connection with God. But you can still do I'm not wearing a wedding garment for you, God. I'm going to thumb my nose at you. And you can create a spiritual barrier between you and God. And so I think that's the sense in which we need to understand hell as the absence of God. It's not the ontological absence of God. It's the spiritual absence of God.
Mike, thank you. Wonderful question to start the second hour with Jimmy. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live. It does, in fact, bring us to the break. We'll be right back with more weird questions for Jimmy right after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
The power of prayer simply means that words have an effect. For example, when a couple says, "I do," it literally changes two people to becoming one in marriage. When you say, "I love you," it changes us and it gives us value. The power of prayer is in the words and in the sentiment, but it's also in the fact that God, who is omnipotent, all-powerful, answers our prayers.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. That music means Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour, and lots of weird questions to come. This one comes from Jason. Did Jesus' guardian angel have the easiest job?
Well, maybe. If a guardian angel's job is to guard us from temptation and so forth, well, Jesus didn't have any disordered desires. And so if in that respect, Jesus's guardian angel would have had the easiest job. But that may not be the only thing that Jesus' guardian angel was tasked with. His guardian angel may have had other duties that would have made his job harder, like protecting Jesus from constant demonic attack. So maybe Jesus's guardian angel had the hardest job of all. He had to fend off all the demons that wanted to subvert Jesus's plans. And so it's possible he could have had a much harder job than most guardian angels. Also, another task he may have had was keeping Jesus hidden. Because there is, people have noticed, okay, so what's up with the temptation or testing in the wilderness? In Greek, temptation and testing are the same thing, where the devil comes and tries to tempt Jesus. I mean, doesn't he know that as the all-holy Son of God, Jesus is not going to sin, so testing him is pointless, or trying to tempt him is pointless? Well, maybe he did know that. And my best interpretation of why the devil might do that is he did know that the all-holy Son of God is not going to give in to temptation. And so what he was doing by trying to subject Jesus to temptation was trying to find out, is this really the Son of God or not? And there is this theme in early Christian literature of Jesus, especially in his early life, being hidden in some way from the forces of darkness. I was talking about this recently. This is a very prominent theme, for example. Now, this book is not in the Bible, but there is an early Christian apocalypse written about the year 67. And there's a fairly narrow range of when this book was written. It was after the death of Peter, which happened in 65 or 66, but before the suicide of Nero, which happened in mid-68. So it looks like this book was written about AD 67 plus or minus 12 months. And it's called The Ascension of Isaiah. And the hiddenness of Jesus's birth and early life is a very prominent theme in The Ascension of Isaiah. At one point in the narrative, Isaiah has been caught up to seventh heaven, and he witnesses the descent of Jesus through the seven heavens and then through the firmament, where the atmosphere, which is where the demons are, to be born as a child. And the Son of God puts on disguises as he's descended. He makes himself look like the angels that live in these different heavens on his way down, so they don't recognize it's the Son of God. And then when he gets into the atmosphere, the firmament, he's disguised there too. And they think, oh, he's just a demon or something. And then he gets born. And then he ends up getting crucified and then rising from the dead. And he throws open his identity for everybody to see. And he reascends through the firmament and through the seven heavens to get back up to where he started. And all of the demons and all of the angels are like, wait, how did he get down below us? We didn't see him come down. And so, even though this is not canonical, it is this theme of divine hiddenness, or Christocentric hiddenness, I should say, is there in early Christian literature. And so it's possible that even before his adult ministry, Jesus's guardian angel had been tasked with keeping him hidden so that the devil, for example, would not know exactly who is the Son of God. Is it this Jesus guy or somebody else? So that's one possible task. And then once Jesus's identity is thrown open, which happened during his earthly ministry, because the demons start recognizing him after the devil has tested him, then he may have been subject to various demonic attacks. If you think about the temptation in the wilderness or the testing in the wilderness, that was a form of demonic attack. And he passed that, but that didn't mean the demons all stopped. So, in terms of, did Jesus' guardian angel have the easiest job? Well, maybe in one respect, he didn't have to really protect him against temptation, but he may have had to protect him against other things like being discovered or being attacked by demons.
What a great question. Thank you very much, Jason, for that. This one comes from the JM Lou 11. I have a question on resurrection, and if resurrection requires that our bodies be the same as our earthly bodies. Recently, I finished a fictional story, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Steel Ball Run, where the characters receive powers from having some interaction with the body of Christ. The story takes place on an alternate Earth, though the story of Christ is mostly the same, except for the fact that he resurrected, but that his corpse remains. This is very likely that because the author is Japanese, that he does not know the specifics of Christian theology. This made me wonder if the resurrection of the body requires the same earthly body that died, or could God possibly create a new body for us, our heavenly bodies?
Okay, so what the church teaches is that our body in the resurrection is the same as the body we had in this life, but it doesn't teach that all the same matter is involved. And this is something that has been discussed actually for centuries, going back into the Middle Ages. Theologians would talk about, well, so what would happen if someone, like if a cannibal ate you? So the matter that's in your body later became the matter that's in the cannibal's body. And they would talk about these questions. So, people, when they ask similar questions today, what if a cannibal ate you? What would happen in the resurrection? Ha, ha, ha. So, okay, dude, we've been here for hundreds of years. We've thought about that. And so there was a recognition that the matter in your body changes over time. Now, back then, they didn't have the modern atomic theory of matter. The idea had been proposed. It had been proposed by some ancient Greek philosophers, for example, named Leucippus and Democritus, but it was always a minority view. The majority view was based on Aristotelian science, which held that there is this stuff called, not atoms, but this infinitely divisible stuff called matter that takes on different forms, that makes it different kinds of matter. But it was recognized that and it was sometimes called the stuff down at the bottom underneath all the forms is sometimes called prime matter. And so it was recognized that the prime matter in your body changes over time. That's obvious just by watching a baby grow. Babies are not 150 pounds, but they may be 150 pounds by the time they grow up. So it was recognized as the baby eats and grows, the baby acquires more matter in its body. It was also recognized that we also get rid of some of the matter that enters our bodies. So and today, after the discovery or confirmation of the atomic theory of matter, we have an even more precise understanding about how much matter changes over. If you think about the amount of food that you eat in a lifetime, and this may be more for some of us than others, Psychelet.
Oh, come on.
But if it was there. Sorry.
It was there. Yeah.
So if you think about the amount of food you eat in a lifetime compared to your average body weight, the amount of food you eat in a lifetime is enormous compared to how much we individually weigh. And so obviously there's a lot of material turnover. And, every few years, most of all the cells of our bodies, except like in our bones, they change over and stuff. So there's been a recognition that our bodies can be the same. Like I have the same body now I did when I was an infant, but basically all of the matter in my body has changed since I was an infant. So we can have the same body even if it doesn't involve the same matter. Well, this is something that has recently been commented upon both by the International Theological Commission, which is an advisory body that's run by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, and it's even more recently than that been commented on by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith itself. So there's a recognition that even though we'll have the same body, it may not involve the same matter. That's something we have to leave up to God. What I would say in Jesus's case is that even though it's hypothetically possible that God could have in his resurrection created the same body, I find it very hard to imagine that none of the same matter was involved. So and this also goes back to some documents that have been written by the International Theological Commission. Any interpretation of the resurrection of Jesus that leaves his body in the tomb, like in this story that is being described, is an inadequate understanding. We may not have a promise that all the same matter is going to be in our resurrection body that's in our physical body at the end of its life, but leaving Jesus's corpse in his tomb is not an adequate understanding of the resurrection, and I would say the same thing for this story. But in terms of the question, could God possibly create a new body for us that didn't involve the matter in our earthly bodies? Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for the question, JM. On we go. This one comes from Lara-GJ1DU. I don't know if that has any particular meaning, but there it is. Lara wants to know, my daughter wants to know, she says, what would happen if you dropped a skyscraper-sized piece of tungsten onto a nuclear armory where the bombs are stored? Would all the bombs go off? How big a fallout would it be? And would it be a deterrent for nuclear weapons?
Okay. Actually, your daughter may have a promising future in munitions design, because she's talking about in dropping a skyscraper piece of tungsten on a nuclear armory. She's actually describing a weapon system that has been proposed. This weapon system is sometimes what's known as a mass driver. So you have this like mass of tungsten and you drive it from orbit into a particular location on Earth to destroy what's at that target. And it's often proposed that you drop rods of tungsten onto these sites. And this version of the mass driver is nicknamed rods from God, because you're dropping rods of tungsten out of the heavens. So let's suppose you had a skyscraper-sized one and you dropped it on a nuclear armory. What would happen? Well, it depends on what kind of bombs are stored in the armory. Are they... because their nuclear bombs work different ways. What happens in a nuclear bomb is you have to bring a certain amount of radioactive material together to create a chain reaction. And that amount of matter is what's known as the critical mass. So you have to get, let's say, enough uranium-235 together in one place to create a chain reaction that causes it to go critical in a way that will then cause it to explode, producing the nuclear explosion. So there is a fairly simple form of bomb known as the gun model, where what you have is you have half of the material you need for critical mass at one end of the device and half of the material you need for critical mass at the other end of the device. And you basically shoot one of those masses, like shooting a bullet out of a gun, towards the other. It brings the two masses together really fast. It goes critical and it explodes. Gun model bombs are like the one that was dropped on Hiroshima, the so-called little man or little boy bomb. And they work so simply that they didn't even bother testing this one. They'd done the calculations. They knew this one's going to work. But gun model bombs tend to have smaller payloads. Now, if you have a nuclear armory that's full of gun model bombs and you drop a tungsten rod on the nuclear armory, the resultant damage could force some of the critical mass components together and cause nuclear explosions. So if there are gun model bombs in there, you might get some nuclear explosions when you drop the tungsten rod. On the other hand, there's another kind of nuclear bomb that works differently. And I'm guessing we're about to have the music come up on us.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you about the other kind of nuclear bomb and what would happen if you dropped a rod from God on it on the other side of the break.
All right, let's just not give the computers control over this. We cannot let Skynet get wind of this. But thank you very much, Laura, and your daughter for the question. We'll continue with Jimmy's answer right after this. It's Weird Questions for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live. Have you ever wondered about the mysterious, even obscure aspects of the Catholic faith? Dive into the Jimmy Akin podcast, where Jimmy brings together information from many fields as he pushes the boundaries of apologetics. Tune in today to the Jimmy Akin podcast, Mysteries of the Faith, a highly entertaining, informative, and at times humorous show that will help you grow in your faith. Visit JimmyAkinPodcast.com today to subscribe.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers Monthly Giving Club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, of morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron. Well, welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We're in the midst of a bunch of weird questions for Jimmy Akin, and this one comes from Laura and her daughter. Her daughter had the idea of dropping skyscraper-sized pieces of tungsten onto nuclear armories, and a series of questions. Would the bombs go off? How big would the fallout be? And would this be a deterrent for nuclear weapons? Jimmy, you were in the midst of an answer.
Yeah, so we're working on the first question here of what would happen with the bombs. And I'd mentioned that if you have a gun model bomb, like the little boy bomb that was dropped on Japan in World War II, then you basically have two masses of radioactive material like U-235. And if they come into contact with each other, then they go critical and blow up. Okay, so if you drop a tungsten rod on an armory that's filled with that kind of bomb, some of the individual mass components might get jostled together and go critical, and you could have nuclear explosions. But there's another kind of bomb that is more powerful. And the reason that it's more powerful is there's a limit. If you're using a gun model bomb, there's a limit to how big you can make the components. Like in uranium, I want to say that critical mass is something like 11 pounds of isotope 235. I may have that wrong, but that's my memory. So let's assume that critical mass of uranium-235 is 11 pounds. That means you could have one 5.5 pound chunk and another 5.5 pound chunk at the ends of a gun model bomb, and then you slam them together and it goes critical, and we get an uncontrolled reaction, which leads to an explosion. Okay, fine. You got your explosion, but you can't really make it much bigger because you can't make the components much bigger. I mean, you've got to keep your components. If 11 pounds is the critical mass, you've got to keep the components under 11 pounds. And so, because otherwise they'll go critical before you want them to. So there's a limit to how much mass you can put into this kind of a bomb. So how can we circumvent that? Well, we can use a different type of bomb that distributes the radioactive material and then brings it all together really quickly. So since it's more distributed, you can pile on more material. The question then is, how do you get it all together really fast to cause that precious explosion? Well, the answer is you use implosion. So what you do is you take the radioactive material and you put it inside of, you may have a primer at the center, but you put it inside of a sphere, and you set the sphere to implode, which is the reverse of explode. And so you place a whole bunch of charges around the outside of the sphere that are explosive charges, and when you blow those explosive charges, then it will cause all that force will be directed towards the center of the sphere. It'll push together all of the radioactive material really fast, and you'll get a much bigger nuclear explosion. And so this is the type of bomb, this implosion type bomb, was what was used it was the Fat Man bomb that was also dropped on Japan. And this one, unlike the gun model bomb, this one they had to test because implosion bombs are really tricky. It's not as simple as just slamming two pieces of radioactive material together. Instead, you've got to shape the explosion very carefully so that it implodes evenly. If it doesn't implode evenly, then some of it's going to vent off and through an imperfection in the design, and you're not going to get your precious explosion. So you need to be very careful with how you cause the implosion to happen. And that means that conceptually, implosion style bombs are fragile. They have to be very carefully designed or they won't blow up. And so what would then happen if you dropped a tungsten skyscraper on a nuclear armory filled with implosion bombs is you just smash the bombs. But these bombs are not as simple as slamming two pieces. Wreck the bombs, but you would not get any explosions. So that leads us, and hydrogen bombs and so forth, they're just fancy explosion bombs, or fancy implosion bombs. So what happens with the next question? How big a fallout would you get in dropping a tungsten rod on this? Well, like I said, it depends on what bombs are in there. If you drop a rod on gun model bombs, you may get some explosions that will generate moderate amounts of radioactive fallout because these are moderate sized explosions. They can't be very big. So you could get significant fallout that way. On the other hand, if you drop a rod on a nuclear armory that's filled with implosion style bombs, they're not going to detonate. What may happen is you may get a little bit of fallout that's the equivalent of what is ordinarily called a dirty bomb. A dirty bomb is not actually a nuclear weapon. Instead, it's a conventional weapon that explodes and scatters nuclear material. So there's no nuclear explosion here. It's just a regular explosion that happens to be laced with nuclear material, and that's why it's called a dirty bomb. Well, if you dropped a rod on a nuclear weapons armory that had implosion-style bombs in them, there is some radioactive material in them, and by dropping the rod, you're going to cause, a bunch of damage. And so this would be the equivalent of a dirty bomb going off. So there would be no nuclear explosion. You might get a little bit of fallout, but not much, and not compared to a real nuclear explosion. Would it be a good deterrent for nuclear weapons? Well, depends who does it. If aliens came down and did this, it might scare everybody. But if one nation state tried doing it to another nation state, or if a James Bond style supervillain who had an eco conscience or something, tried doing it to some nation state, I would think it would be more likely to produce a violent reaction. And so I think it would be more likely to provoke nuclear war than deter it, because unless you're aliens and can surround the planet with spaceships, there's no way that you're going to be able to drop rods on all of the weapons stockpiles on Earth. And what that means is if someone starts destroying individual weapon stockpiles, but they don't have the credible threat to destroy them all, then it's going to lead to more nuclear instability on the use it or lose it principle. Because if I'm some country and I've got a bunch of nuclear stockpiles and someone is beginning to take them out, I'm more likely to use the ones I have while I can still use them.
Ooh.
So Laura, I think your daughter has a promising future in weapons design, but I would leave the diplomacy to the diplomats in this case.
Thank you very much for the question. This next one comes from Nebo. Assuming that Nephilim are literally the result of human women somehow mating with fallen angels, what sort of nature would they have? Could they be baptized?
Okay, so anyone who wants to be baptized, the church is pretty much going to baptize them. But in terms of, so we're assuming that Nephilim, notice again, this is a question I'm being asked. And the question assumes that Nephilim are literally the result of human women somehow mated with angels. So I'm not advocating that this happens. I'm just answering the question. Okay. So I'll tell you what Thomas Aquinas thought, and then I'll tell you what I think. Aquinas thought that this was possible. He thought that there are situations based on reports he had received where women were impregnated by demons. So demon babies were a real thing for him, or at least a possible thing. And his argument was that his claim was that although demons can, like other angels, can come up with temporary aerial bodies that they can use, to function in the world, kind of like avatars in the movie Avatar, they can't actually create human reproductive cells. And so he said, in order to explain these accounts, they'd have to get the reproductive cells from some human. And so what they would do, on Aquinas's view, would be first they would appear to a human as a succubus. A succubus is a female demon that has marital relations with a man. And so the demon would first appear as a succubus, have relations with a man, get the male germ cells, and then take them. Then they'd do a walk on the wild side. They'd flip from being a succubus to an incubus, which is a female demon, or which is another kind of demon that has relations with a woman. They'd take the male germ cells they got from the man, then they'd have relations in a new form with a woman and impregnate the woman with the cells they got from a human man. And so as a result, the demon baby, even though there was a demon involved in its conception, is going to be purely human.
Wow.
And so so that's Aquinas's view. But Aquinas's view is predicated on two things. The first one is that, and I don't blame Aquinas for this because he didn't know about genetic engineering, but the first thing is it's predicated on the idea that the demon didn't tamper with the genes of the germ cells it got from the man. I would say, hey, we can do gene editing now. Maybe demons can do it too, in which case the person might not be fully human. They might be an extra large human, for example, just like the Nephilim were reported to be. In Aramaic, the word Nephilim means giants. So maybe there could have been some genetic modifications. The other thing is Aquinas is assuming that that demons don't have the telekinetic control of matter at a level needed to produce human germ cells. I'd want to know how he knows that. I don't know what limits demons or other angels have on their telekinetic powers. And if they can manipulate matter to produce aerial bodies for themselves to use, I don't know why they can't manipulate matter to produce human germ cells out of other matter. So I don't know that you have to go the fully human route the way Aquinas does. I think there are other possibilities.
All right. Thank you very much for the question. That qualifies as weird enough, and we appreciate it, Nebo. I think I better take a quick break, and then we'll come back with more weird questions for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
One of the biggest mistakes a Christian can make is to try to do good without God's help. St. Therese said, when we trust only ourselves and not God, our soul becomes incapable of virtue. Her remedy? Works of charity. And the greatest work of charity is to share the gospel. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we encourage you to share the gospel with someone who doesn't know Jesus. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
Isn't it awesome that we today do not recognize his presence in the Eucharist? Is it because we really don't go to him in humbleness of heart and say, Lord, I don't believe, help my unbelief. Lord, I want to see you. I want to recognize you. I cannot live without you. Are we saying that?
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I read ahead. Exciting questions to come. Let's see how many we can get to with Jimmy before we have to end this hour. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin today on Catholic Answers Live. This one comes from Jamie James, and Jamie asks, is there a scientific reason behind automatic writing? What might be happening outside of supernatural causes and assuming no mental health issues as well?
Okay, so notice the two stipulations. We're assuming that no mental health issues are involved, and we're assuming that nothing supernatural is going on. Now, for folks who may not be aware, automatic write-in is a way of generating text, so it involves write-in, that a person does not appear to be consciously in control of. That's why it's called automatic. A classical way of doing automatic write-in is you take a pen or pencil and you hold it in your hand and you put it down, maybe your non-dominant hand. So if you're a right-handed person, you might put it in your left hand. And then you put it to a piece of paper and you let it start writing without you consciously dictating what it's going to do. And you may even ask questions of it. And it's been proposed that through automatic write-in, one may contact, like spirits and get information from them. Interestingly, back in the early 20th century, it's now the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, but then it was the Holy Office. The Holy Office actually addressed the subject of automatic write-in, and they gave a very interesting answer. Now, when they got what's called a dubium, which means a doubt or a question, and these are typically sent in by bishops. And when they respond to a dubium, the normal way they do it is they'll say, the bishop will ask a question, and then they'll either say affirmative, meaning yes, or negative, meaning no. Yes, you can do this. No, you can't do this. If they say anything else, it's interesting, because it's not just a straight yes or no. So what happened was this bishop, this is the early 20th century, this bishop sends in an inquiry, and he describes a guy, a Catholic, who's doing automatic write-in. And he gives him a fake name, Titius, and he says, so here's what happens. Titius, when he learns about someone dying, he wants to find out, like, is this person okay, and things like that. And he excludes all negative purpose from his intention, and he prays to God, and he takes a pen and he starts doing automatic write-in, but he has prayed to God. He's excluding all from his intention, all evil influences, all even will. He's trusting God, and the answers he gets back to the questions he asks are all in accordance with the Christian faith. They don't contradict any doctrine at all, and they're typically notes from the departed about like how my relatives are not praying for me enough, or they haven't had masses said for me enough, and I want them to do more of that so that I can move on and get with God quicker and be done with my purgatory. And so everything here looks on the up and up. He's excluding all evil influences. He's praying to God. He's entrusting himself to God. He's getting orthodox messages back of the type you would expect from souls that are in purgatory. Is what Titius is doing okay? And instead of saying yes or no, the Holy Office came back and said, not under the circumstances described. So not under the circumstances described is not a flat no. And it suggests there could be circumstances where what Titius is doing is warranted. It doesn't spell out what those circumstances would be. Like maybe if a ghost had contacted Titius or something and he wants to get more information, maybe then it would be okay. But it's not a flat no to all automatic write-in. And this is early 20th century Holy Office stuff. This is not some post-Vatican II loopiness. This is hardcore. Thomism is large and in charge time. So anyway, that's something to be aware of when you're thinking about automatic write-in. Now, to Jamie James's question, if we're assuming that we're eliminating mental health, problems from the consideration, and we're assuming no supernatural causes, it's not God moving your pen, what scientifically could explain automatic write-in? Well, the pioneering work on this was done by a scientist named Frederick Myers. He lived in the 1800s. He was born in 1843, died in 1901. And he was one of the founders of the British Society for Psychical Research, or SPR. If you go to the Psy Encyclopedia website that they maintain, there's a whole page on Frederick Myers, and it talks about what I'm about to mention. He's well known for having written a book. It actually came out 2 years after his death in 1903. It's called Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death. And as a scientist, Frederick Myers tried to think of all the explanations he could for what might cause automatic write-in. And he came up with 5 explanations. The first one is conscious will. Now, this could be cases where automatic write-in is being consciously willed by a person as a fraud. On the other hand, it might not be intentional fraud. They might still be controlling the pen consciously, but kind of fooling themselves into thinking they're not. Mm-hmm. And so that would be, but it's still under conscious control. The second explanation that Myers proposed was what was referred to as unconscious cerebration. Basically, that's a fancy term. It just means your subconscious is doing it. So you're not consciously controlling what the pen does, but your subconscious is controlling what the pen does. His third explanation was it could be a higher faculty in your own mind that you're not normally aware of. So it's not your conscious mind, it's something that's part of you, but it's higher than your conscious mind. What that might be, who knows? But at least he's trying to map out the conceptual space of what could be responsible. If it's not your conscious mind, maybe it's something below your conscious mind, like your subconscious, or if it's not your conscious mind, maybe it's something above your conscious mind, like a higher faculty that you have. Then, so that kind of eliminates all the elements of you. If it's not your conscious mind or below your conscious mind or above your conscious mind, okay, you're not responsible. So what else might be responsible? His fourth explanation was telepathic contact with other incarnate minds. So maybe I'm not in control of what the pen is doing, but I'm in contact with you, Psychopaths, and it's you who are responsible for what the pen is doing. Maybe it's your subconscious. I'm picking up information, like let's say you're asking me answers to questions that I don't know the answers to, but you know what the answers are. Okay. So let's say you're quizzing me on what did I have for dinner the last 7 nights. Well, I have no idea, but you may know what you had for dinner the last 7 nights. And so I'm writing, and my subconscious is in telepathic communication with your subconscious, and it's pulling that information out of your subconscious, and I'm writing it down.
Okay.
So I'm picking up the info from you. This is a classic problem in parapsychology, by the way, when it comes to like ghosts and how do you know you're talking to a ghost as opposed to just someone's subconscious and you're picking up the information telepathically. Then the fifth and final explanation that Myers proposed was discarnate spirits, meaning humans that no longer have their bodies, and extrahuman intelligences, meaning things like angels that never had bodies or demons that never had bodies. So Myers has these 5 possible explanations: conscious will, your unconscious cerebration, or basically your unconscious, some higher faculty in you, telepathic contact with other living people, and contact with spirits that are not those of living people. And Myers would, being a scientist, he would only propose the latter, in the last one, of other spirits, in rare cases where other explanations did not work. So Jamie James, that's a sketch of some work that's been done on automatic writing and what might explain it scientifically. And if you'd like more information, check out Frederick Myers' book, Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death, and also the Psi Encyclopedia webpage on Frederick Myers.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm going to get the Wayward Templar's question in now. Wayward Templar 1314. Where would the Pope go if Rome was nuked with a nuclear bomb designed for maximal radiation damage over the area? The Vatican is largely intact, but is rendered unlivable for millennia due to fallout. Would the church make a new St. Peter's Basilica? Would the bones of the martyrs in the city of Rome be relocated if the area around the reliquaries is too radioactive to enter?
Okay, so we got a series of questions. Where would the Pope go if Rome was nuked? Somewhere else. Where that would be, I don't know. It'd be up to him. You know, he might go somewhere else in Italy. He might go further afield. Under the specifications of the question, the Vatican is intact, but is rendered unlivable for millennia. Okay, so I'm guessing they were using a thorium isotope in that case. In any event, if it were unlivable for a short period of time, even a century or two, they might not abandon Rome. They might, wait a century and then have a grand Vatican reopening ceremony. But if it's going to be millennia, my guess is, yeah, they would permanently relocate elsewhere. They've done that kind of thing on a temporary basis before, like during the Avignon papacy, where even though the Pope was the Bishop of Rome, he was functionally living and had his court in France. And so if Rome got taken out by some kind of long isotoped nuke, and you couldn't use it for millennia, yeah, they'd build a new headquarters elsewhere. In terms of would the bones of the martyrs in the city of Rome be relocated? Possibly.
That would depend on the nature of the isotope and isotopes and how safe it was to go into Rome and recover sacred artifacts like relics and artworks and other things. But to the extent they could recover those, they would want to.
Wayward Templar 1314, thank you very much for the question. Thanks to everybody who sends these excellent questions to make these excellent programs with Jimmy Akin. You check out Jimmy's work at mysterious.fm or wherever you get your podcasts. Check out all the mysteries he covers in Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Thanks, Jimmy. I always enjoy these.
My pleasure.
All right, that'll do it for us. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.